May 26, 2021. A single post goes up on Naomi Osaka's social media, and it stops the tennis world cold. I've often felt that people have no regard for athletes' mental health, and this rings true whenever I see a press conference or partake in one. We're often sat there and asked questions that we've been asked multiple times before, or asked questions that bring doubt into our minds, and I'm just not going to subject myself to people that doubt me. No press conferences, not at Roland Garros, not anywhere if she can help it. She calls it what it is, kicking a person while they're down. The world's highest-paid female athlete, a woman worth tens of millions, with a global microphone most people would kill for, walks away from the media entirely. And then, months later, a fan pushes her on Instagram, tells her to play like she has something to prove. Respectfully, I don't have anything to prove. She lists every doubt anyone's ever thrown at her, lucky, one-hit wonder, hardcore only, and closes with 4 words that have nothing careful about them at all. I don't give a f*** anymore. Same woman, same year roughly. One version of her won't say a word to a room full of reporters. The other version fires back at strangers on her own timeline, unfiltered, unscripted, whenever she wants. So which one is the real Naomi Osaka?
Naomi Osaka has spent years refusing the exact kind of scrutiny most athletes are contractually required to accept. When she skipped her media obligation at the 2021 French Open, the tournament fined her $15,000 and threatened suspension from every Grand Slam if she kept it up. She paid it. She withdrew from the tournament entirely rather than back down. This is not a woman without options. That same year, Forbes named her the highest-paid female athlete on the planet, reporting $37.4 million in prize money and endorsements over 12 months, more than Serena Williams, more than anyone. She has every incentive to play nice with the press that helps build that number, and yet the press is the one room she keeps walking out of. Meanwhile, the same woman posts a public rant on social media, telling a critic to get a job. She goes toe-to-toe with fans in Instagram Q&As. She's argued with opponents in on-court interviews. If this were simply a woman allergic to criticism, none of that would make sense. She's not hiding from conflict. She's choosing where to have it. That's the puzzle. Not is she private, she isn't. Something more specific is going on. To understand it, we have to go back to what press conferences actually did to her long before any of this became a headline.
She won her first Grand Slam at the 2018 U.S. Open at 20 years old, beating Serena Williams in a final that should have been the best night of her life. Instead, the crowd booed through the trophy ceremony, confused and unhappy about a controversial call against Williams earlier in the match. Osaka stood there, in tears, apologizing for winning. It was the first time the world saw how much her success could cost her emotionally, and it happened in front of a live microphone with nowhere to go. From there, the pressure didn't let up. It compounded. Every match became a referendum. Reporters asked her to explain her losses, her expectations, her mental state. The same questions tournament after tournament, worded slightly differently each time. In her own telling, on Jay Shetty's podcast On Purpose, she described years where her sense of self-worth was tied to her ranking. A loss wasn't just a loss, it was evidence against her, delivered publicly, and then handed to a room full of people whose job was to ask her to relive it out loud. Then came the moment that broke it wide open. There's a specific incident that tennis fans still talk about, a press conference where a journalist's question was, by her team's own account, aggressively toned, seemingly designed less to inform the public than to unsettle her. Osaka broke down crying in front of the cameras. It became a clip. It circulated. It's the kind of moment she referenced when she finally explained her decision to stop doing press altogether. I've watched many clips of athletes breaking down after a loss in the press room, and I know you have as well. I believe that whole situation is kicking a person while they're down, and I don't understand the reasoning behind it. Notice what she's identifying. Not that criticism exists. She knows criticism exists and always will. What she's naming is a structure. A press conference is not a conversation. It's a room she's required to enter with people she didn't choose, asking questions she didn't agree to in advance, on a timetable that's mandatory, whether she just won or just lost the hardest match of her year. She has no say in the framing, she has no ability to walk away mid-question. She can't correct a mischaracterization the moment it happens. She has to sit with it, in public, and answer. By May 2021, she'd had enough of that specific structure. Not of criticism in general, of that room and being required to be in it. So she wrote the statement. She named the fine she expected to receive and said she hoped it would go to a mental health charity. She skipped Roland Garros, then Wimbledon. The tour threatened her with a suspension from majors if she kept refusing. She didn't reverse course because of the threat. She withdrew from the tournament instead, protecting the boundary rather than the trophy. That's the real reason underneath the headline. It was never simply, "I don't want to be criticized." It was, "I don't want to be criticized in a format where I have no control over the terms."
Which brings us back to the version of Naomi Osaka firing off replies on Instagram and Threads, and suddenly it stops looking like a contradiction at all. Look at what happens when she engages online. A fan pushes her, she responds instantly. Respectfully, "I don't have anything to prove." When a critic calls her a fluke after a difficult stretch, she doesn't stay silent. She lists 4 Grand Slam titles, lighting the Olympic torch and being close to the top 50 the year after giving birth, then closes with, "You couldn't even touch one of my accomplishments with your fingernail." When a heated on-court exchange with opponent Sorana Cristea at the 2026 Australian Open went public, she didn't disappear from the conversation. She came back to the microphone on her own terms. "I think the first couple things that I said on the court were disrespectful. I don't like disrespecting people. That's not what I do." Every one of these is still a room full of critics. She's still absorbing pressure live in public. The difference is who built the rune. On social media, she decides when to respond and when to scroll past. She decides the words. She can post, watch the reaction, and post again, or say nothing at all. She said she often doesn't read the messages. Nobody is compelling her into a chair under lights on a schedule that isn't hers. There's a financial layer to this, too. By 2022, Forbes had Osaka earning $51.1 million for the year, again the highest total among any female athlete in the world. Of that $51 million, only $1.1 million came from on-court prize money. The overwhelming majority came from endorsements, Nike, Louis Vuitton, Nissan, and a growing list of global brands paying for association with her specifically, her image, her voice, her story as she tells it. That number reframes everything. When the vast majority of your income depends on how you're perceived rather than how you perform on a given Tuesday, controlling your own narrative isn't a personality quirk. It's closer to protecting the actual asset. A press conference is a format where other people frame the story about Naomi Osaka. A social media post is a format where Naomi Osaka frames the story about Naomi Osaka. Given what's funding her career, that's not a small distinction. It's close to the whole game. So the answer to the title's question isn't she's guarded, and it isn't she's thin-skinned online. It's that she made a distinction, early and expensively, between scrutiny she's forced into and scrutiny she opts into, and she has been remarkably consistent about which side of that line she'll defend, even when defending it costs her fines, headlines, and a Grand Slam appearance.
But there's a second layer underneath the practical logic, less about control, more about who she's accountable to. On that same on-purpose conversation with Jay Shetty, Osaka describes something that sounds small, but isn't. For years, her sense of self-worth was tied almost entirely to her ranking. A win made her valuable, a loss made her not. That's a brutal way to live, even without 12 million people watching. Becoming a mother, she said, shifted that, moving her focus toward joy, presence, and growth rather than perfection measured by a scoreboard. That shift shows up in how she talks about criticism now. It's not defensive anymore so much as unbothered. "People are always going to have something to say, and I don't give a fuck anymore," she said, not as a performance of toughness, but almost as a shrug. She said elsewhere that she mostly doesn't even look at the messages, positive or negative, because, in her words, she doesn't expect anyone else to be able to do what she does on a tennis court, so why let them narrate it? That's a philosophy, not a coping mechanism. It says, your opinion of my performance doesn't get to become my opinion of myself. It's the opposite of what a mandatory press conference structurally demands, where doubt is handed to her as a question she's required to sit with and answer on the record, whether she's ready or not. Online, she gets to decide if she's ready. That's the freedom she's protecting. Not freedom from criticism, freedom from being required to metabolize someone else's doubt on someone else's timeline. Wealth bought her the leverage to walk out of the room, but the reason she walks out isn't the money. It's that she'd already learned, the hard way, what it costs to let a stranger's question decide how she feels about herself.
Maybe that's the real takeaway, not a story about a tennis star dodging reporters, but about someone who figured out, expensively and publicly, that not all scrutiny is the same. Some of it you can survive. Some of it, if you let it in on someone else's terms, quietly rewires how you see yourself. Naomi Osaka didn't stop listening to the world. She stopped letting the world choose when and how she'd have to answer it. So maybe the question isn't why she avoids the press. Maybe it's why the rest of us keep answering, even when we never agreed to the terms.